The phoenix scar on Isaac Coleman's wrist stopped Captain Marcus Rivera cold. In a small theater in Memphis, time seemed to stand still as he recognized the secret emblem of a unit that was never supposed to exist. How did this elderly black man, quietly seated in the shadows, come to bear the mark of missions buried deep in history? Before we dive into this extraordinary tale of courage, betrayal, and delayed justice, hit subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. This journey will take you through government conspiracies, cover-ups, and a fight for honor that has spanned more than half a century. You won't want to miss how a faint scar changed everything. Isaac Coleman lived in silent seclusion in a modest wooden house, a faint shadow drifting through everyday life. At 78, he was still tall, though his steps were slow, his shoulders stooped as if bearing a half-century's worth of burdens. His hair was snow-white, his face weathered, yet his deep-set eyes held a solemn gravity, the mark of a man forged in the crucible of combat. His home was its own world, shelves groaning with books on military history and biographies of storied generals, yet painfully empty of any photographs or personal keepsakes. Under the bedroom floorboards, locked inside a cold steel box, Isaac's past lay imprisoned. Classified documents detailing the Phoenix Battalion, the racially integrated Special Forces unit the U.S. government insists never existed. Isaac did not merely live, he merely existed. Each morning he shuffled through the streets of Soulsville, gliding past indifferent glances as though he were nothing more than a wisp of smoke. Inside him, an invisible wound still bled, not from the jungles of Vietnam, but from the deliberate amnesia of a nation that once needed him, exploited his courage, and then ruthlessly erased him from its history. The wooden house was both refuge and prison. The books, faithful companions yet powerless to soothe his nightmares. Night after night he awoke, drenched in sweat. His hand would drift instinctively to the phoenix scar on his wrist, the last trace of buried glory. The roar of helicopters, the ghostly faces of fallen comrades fading in gunfire smoke, served as constant reminders that he had survived, but had never truly lived. Isaac learned to become invisible, not by choice, but because it was the only way to endure. He averted curious stares, slipped silently past whispered rumors. Attention, he knew all too well, was a double-edged sword. One wrong word, one careless gesture, and he might awaken the shadows of those who once ordered the Phoenix Battalion's burial. The steel box beneath the floor held more than documents. It held his fear, his pain, and a vow of silence, that the truth would never be spoken. Not out of cowardice, but because he had seen the cost of truth in the eyes of the brothers who never returned. Every day, Isaac faced the small cuts of discrimination. At the bakery on Beale Street, the young clerk brushed past him, offering a forced smile only to the white customer who'd just walked in. Isaac stood there, fingers interlaced, his gaze composed but his heart wrenching. He said nothing. 50 years ago, a dusty uniform and the medals on his chest weren't enough to earn him service in a Georgia diner. "Men like you aren't welcome," the owner had snarled. Now, the words came cloaked in silence and averted glances. The message remained as cold and sharp as ever. At the VA hospital, where Isaac sought treatment for his chronic lung condition, discrimination was even more acute. He sat in the waiting room, each labored breath and dry cough blending with the rustle of the nurse's paperwork. They called other patients, those who arrived after him, while he waited, each minute slipping by like a reminder that he wasn't a priority. A nurse, her eyes briefly regretful, finally led him inside. Yet that delay carved another invisible scar into his soul. Isaac did not complain. He pressed his lips together, nodded stiffly, as if endurance were another medal he must earn. Inside, Isaac raged a silent war. He longed to shout the truth about the Phoenix Battalion, to name the brothers erased from history. But fear held him back. If he spoke out, what would happen? Would the shadows return? Or would he, a man who had lived too long in invisibility, be erased once and for all? Isaac chose silence. Yet every night, the faces of his comrades appeared before him, their eyes demanding, "Why won't you speak?" He clenched his hand around that burning scar and told himself time would soothe the pain. But time only deepened the black pit in his soul, where the truth remained imprisoned, waiting for a single ray of light to break through. Isaac Coleman stepped into the Hattiloo Theater, the strains of blues from Soulsville drifting faintly through the walls. At 78, he chose a seat in the very back row where the stage lights couldn't reach him, a habit of a man long accustomed to living in the shadows. His long-sleeved shirt hugged his tall, gaunt frame, hiding the faint phoenix scar on his wrist, the mark of a secret he'd carried for more than half a century. Isaac sat quietly, his deep-set eyes fixed on the program for the play about veterans, yet his mind drifted back to the jungles of Vietnam, where gunfire and memories of the Phoenix Battalion still haunted him. He hadn't come seeking attention. Never. Attention was the enemy, the wind that could rekindle embers meant to stay cold. But tonight, he wanted, if only for a moment, to lose himself in the story of soldiers like him, men who had fought and sacrificed, yet whose names were not always remembered. Isaac gripped the playbill tightly, his fingers trembling slightly, as though one wrong move could awaken the past. In his chest, a silent storm broiled, the desperate longing to tell the truth, to speak the names of fallen brothers. Yet he remained shackled by fear, the fear that truth would summon the shadows he'd evaded for 50 years. As the stage lights dimmed, a young man strode into the theater, his posture straight, his bearing unmistakably military. Captain Marcus Rivera, age 34, fresh back from Iraq, his hair cropped close, his gaze as sharp as a blade. Marcus had come to honor his grandfather, a veteran saved in the Vietnam War, whose haunting journals spoke of a secret unit called the Phoenix Battalion. Marcus sat a few rows ahead of Isaac, yet his eyes fell on the man when Isaac, in a moment of careless haste, rolled up his sleeve to consult the program. The phoenix scar gleamed under the muted lights, and Marcus's heart stopped cold. That emblem, his grandfather had drawn it in his journal, a symbol of unsung heroes. Isaac felt Marcus's gaze, sharp as a beam piercing the darkness. He hastily tugged his sleeve down, his heart pounding, a reflex honed by decades of living on constant alert. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to be recognized. Yet Marcus had seen him, and in his chest a spark of curiosity ignited. He sensed something profound, as if fate itself had posed a question he could not ignore. Marcus leaned forward, observing Isaac from afar, noting the solemnity in his posture, the silence weighted by one who had carried too much. Suddenly the play was interrupted. An audience member's harsh voice rang out toward Isaac. "He doesn't belong here." Though no reason was stated, the crowd's stares spoke volumes. Isaac's skin color was the issue. He bowed his head, gripping the armrest, his heart twisted, not from shame but because an old wound had surged back, the wound of a man who had shed blood for his country, yet was still treated as an outcast. He wanted to flee, to return to the safety of his invisibility. But then a voice, steady and authoritative, cut through the murmur. Marcus rose and strode toward the front, his eyes like steel. "This man is a guest, and he deserves respect," he declared, not loudly, but with enough force to hush the auditorium. Isaac looked up, startled, yet his gaze remained guarded. He didn't need a hero, didn't need anyone to protect him. But Marcus's intervention touched a hidden corner of his soul, a corner he had locked away, where he once believed justice still lived. Marcus turned back to Isaac. His eyes carried a silent promise. He would not let this man be forgotten. Isaac stood and offered Marcus a polite nod, his voice low and steady. "Thank you, but I'm fine." Yet he was not fine. His heart raced, not only because of what had just happened, but because of Marcus's gaze, the gaze of someone who had seen the scar, had seen him, truly seen him. Isaac left the theater, his steps quicker than usual, as if he were fleeing not just the crowd, but his own past. Yet he knew deep down that this encounter was no accident. Marcus remained, watching Isaac's retreating figure fade into the Memphis night. He pressed his grandfather's journal against his chest, feeling as though he'd just touched a secret greater than his own life. He resolved to uncover the truth, despite Isaac's haunting warning, delivered in a raspy, echoing voice. "The past should stay buried, son." But Marcus could not let it rest, not after seeing that scar, not after sensing the pain in Isaac's eyes, the pain of a hero erased. Isaac Coleman sat in his small wooden house in Soulsville, Memphis. His hands trembled slightly, worn by age and memory, as they gripped the edge of his chair while he looked into Marcus Rivera's eyes. Marcus, with the unwavering gaze of a Marine, had shattered the shell of silence Isaac had built over 50 years. Beneath it, a quiet storm raged, the fear of exposure tangled with a fierce longing to tell the truth, to speak the names of the Phoenix Battalion brothers, those whom the world had willfully forgotten. Yet Isaac knew that truth always demands its price. Under Marcus's gentle persistence, Isaac began to open his heart. His voice was hoarse and low, like wind through the Vietnamese jungle of old. He spoke of the Phoenix Battalion, an experimental special operations unit formed in 1967. 10 men, 5 black and 5 white, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jeremiah Brooks, a black officer of sharp intellect and rare courage. They moved like ghosts in the night, slipping behind enemy lines to rescue POWs in North Vietnam, where death lurked behind every bush. Their success rate far surpassed any other unit, yet their glory was never acknowledged. Isaac paused. His eyes misted as if he saw once more the faces of his fallen comrades, the men whose names had been erased. The greatest wound was not the war itself, but betrayal. Isaac revealed that the battalion was disbanded not for failure, but because they uncovered lethal evidence. Colonel Raymond Caldwell, a high-ranking officer, had sold tactical secrets to North Vietnam for profit. The files they seized at an enemy camp, reports, letters, pay ledgers, were knives twisted into their loyalty. Instead of an investigation, they were obliterated. Isaac clenched his fist. The phoenix scar on his wrist burned hot, reminding him of the vow of silence he had kept for far too long. Guided by Isaac, Marcus stepped into the tiny bedroom. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath each footfall. Isaac knelt, his hands trembling as he pried up a floorboard to reveal a cold steel box, its surface buried beneath the dust of time. He unlocked it, each click echoing like the heartbeat of the past. Inside lay buried history, mission reports stamped in fading ink, photographs of soldiers standing by helicopters, and an unawarded silver medal, lying there in solemn witness to a broken promise. Marcus lifted a photograph. His eyes shone with resolve, but Isaac looked away, his heart heavy. Opening this box, he knew, was to reopen a door to danger. Marcus did not stop. He began reaching out to the surviving veterans of the Phoenix Battalion, scattered across America, living under new names, new lives. But the past does not easily let go. One evening, as Isaac stood by the window and the curtains stirred softly, he spotted an unmarked black car parked across the street. Its headlights flashed, cold as a warning. The phone rang. An anonymous voice hissed, "Stop digging, Mr. Coleman, if you don't want to lose everything." Isaac hung up. His breath came heavy, his lung disease constricting his chest. He was not afraid for himself. He feared for Marcus and for those who might be swept into this maelstrom. In San Diego, Marcus too felt the darkness closing in. He was summoned to base, confronted with grave accusations, misuse of military databases, endangering national security. His commanding officer, eyes downcast with regret, warned him to abandon the investigation. Marcus stood at attention, yet a fire burned within him. He thought of his grandfather, of the journal entries describing the moment he was saved by the Phoenix Battalion. He thought of Isaac, of the old man's eyes, the eyes of a forgotten hero. Marcus knew he could not stop, whatever the cost to his career, or even to his own safety. They both realized the enemy was not merely the past, but powerful forces still guarding Senator Raymond Caldwell's secret, a man now wielding tremendous influence in Washington. Caldwell had not only erased the Phoenix Battalion to hide his crimes, he had built an empire on lies and would do anything to keep it intact. Isaac sat in the dark, his hand resting on the steel box, wondering if the truth was worth the price. Marcus, at the distant base, clenched the phone. He vowed that Isaac would not have to fight alone. They were stepping into a new battle, not with bullets, but with memory and truth. Yet Isaac knew, deep in his soul, that this might be the final fight. He closed his eyes. The faces of the Phoenix Battalion rose before him, his brothers, urging, "It's time, Isaac." He opened his eyes. His breath steadied, and a silent resolve took hold. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then stay tuned, for more surprising developments lie ahead. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see people joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story so we can bring you even more great tales. In the VA hospital room in Memphis, the air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant and the rhythmic hiss of the respirator. Isaac Coleman lay on the bed, his breathing labored, each breath a battle against the chronic illness eating away at his life. His eyes grew dim, not from the harsh white lights overhead, but from memories of the Phoenix Battalion, the brothers who had fallen, the secrets he carried like a curse. He gripped the edge of the blanket, his heart beating slowly, wondering if this was the end, if the truth he had guarded for 50 years would die with him. Suddenly, a tall figure appeared beside his bed, as if stepped straight from a dream. It was Jeremiah Brooks, the older black man with silver hair and an unbowed stance, despite the wrinkles age had carved into his face. Isaac blinked, certain he was seeing a ghost. Jeremiah Brooks, the lieutenant colonel who led the Phoenix Battalion, had supposedly died in an explosion in Vietnam in 1970. Yet there he stood, flesh and blood, his eyes blazing with a fire that never went out. "It's me, Isaac," he whispered, His voice was warm, yet heavy with emotion. Isaac felt his chest tighten, not from his lung disease, but from a surge of feeling, hope, pain, and a fierce fear. Brooks sat down, gently placing a hand on Isaac's shoulder, as he had on countless nights in the Vietnamese jungle when the unit waited in darkness. He revealed a shocking truth. His death had been a ruse. With the help of a disillusioned CIA operative, Brooks had faked his death and lived in hiding in New Orleans under a new identity, an invisible man, much like Isaac. For 50 years, he had quietly gathered evidence against Raymond Caldwell, the man who had erased the Phoenix Battalion to cover his treason. Brooks produced a small hard drive from his coat pocket, its metal surface gleaming like a promise. Inside were recordings of Caldwell ordering the destruction of records, financial documents detailing secret payments, letters proving he sold information to North Vietnam. Isaac stared at the hard drive, his heart pounding, as though the buried truth had come alive in his hands. Brooks's appearance was a beacon of light, yet it was also the wind that could reignite danger. Isaac felt it, like an instinct from old battlefields. In his heart, hope mingled with dread, hope that the Phoenix Battalion would be exonerated, dread that the price to pay might be too high. Brooks met his gaze, eyes filled with apology and resolve. "I've abandoned you too long, Isaac," he whispered, "but now it's time we finish this." Isaac nodded, though in his mind lingered a haunting question. Did he have the strength to see this through to the end? Danger arrived faster than they imagined. One night soon after, Isaac's Soulsville home was breached. The window lay in shards, footprints tracked across the floor, and several documents from the steel box were gone. Isaac stood amid the wreckage, fingers gripping the window frame. It felt as though the past was invading the present. In San Diego, Marcus Rivera faced shadows of his own. His office at the base had been ransacked, files scattered across his desk as if someone delivered a stark warning. Marcus clenched his fists, his eyes blazing with anger and determination. He thought of Isaac, of Brooks, of his grandfather, saved by the Phoenix Battalion. He knew he could not stop now, even if his career teetered on the brink. The darkness targeted more than just them. Surviving members of the Phoenix Battalion were also under threat. In Chicago, Dr. Samuel Hayes received notice of an unusual medical audit. His patient records were scrutinized, as though someone sought to tarnish his reputation. In Miami, explosives expert Luis Navarro got an anonymous call, delivered through his son. "Tell your father to back off, or the whole family will pay." Navarro, who once risked everything among bombs and bullets, now felt his heart tremble at the thought of his loved ones. Yet he would not relent, not after Brooks returned. They decided to regroup at a remote farm outside Savannah, Georgia, where fields stretched unbroken and no city lights shone. Isaac, despite his frailty, insisted on coming. He cradled the steel box as though it were the very soul of the Phoenix Battalion. Marcus drove, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, alert for any sign of a tail. Brooks sat in back, silent, yet his presence was a warming flame for them all. They knew every mile brought them closer to the truth, and perhaps to their final hour. Deep within Isaac, a silent resolve took hold. If he must die, he would die for the truth, not in silence. Isaac Coleman sat among the surviving brothers of the Phoenix Battalion. In his eyes shone a spark of hope he had thought lost long ago. Before them lay their audacious plan, to reveal the truth about the Phoenix Battalion in Washington, D.C., at the very event where Senator Raymond Caldwell would speak on national security. Isaac gripped the steel box containing the remaining documents. His heart pounded, not only from his lung disease, but from the surge of feeling that, after 50 years of silence, the truth finally had a chance to rise. Yet he knew, deep inside, that each step forward was a dance with death. The team worked tirelessly. Jeremiah Brooks, with the calm of the commander who once led them through Vietnam's jungles, assigned each task. They coordinated with Catherine Wells, an investigative reporter from the Baltimore Sun who devoted her career to exposing injustice. Marcus Rivera reached out to veterans organizations ready to amplify their voices. Luis Navarro's granddaughter, a young woman fluent in social media, built an online network to disseminate the evidence on Twitter and beyond. Each member carried their own fear. Isaac worried for his life. Brooks regretted the years he'd abandoned his comrades. Marcus feared for his career, but they were united by one belief: the truth could no longer be buried. On the day of the event, Washington blazed in sunlight. Yet tension weighed heavily in the hall where Caldwell would speak. Dressed in a crisp suit with a confident smile, the senator took the podium, his voice echoing patriotic pledges and national security promises. But inside him grew a vague unease. He did not know that from Savannah, the Phoenix Battalion team had set their plan in motion. Catherine Wells's fingers flew over her keyboard as she dispatched mission reports to major news outlets. The recording of Caldwell ordering the destruction of the battalion's files was posted on Twitter, spreading like wildfire. Samuel Hayes's medical records, detailing each wound of the POWs they'd rescued, were sent to leading medical journals. In the hall, journalists' phones buzzed. Their eyes lit up as they read the first headlines. A media storm erupted. A reporter rose, voice icy. "Senator Caldwell, do you have any comment on the evidence showing you ordered the Phoenix Battalion's eradication? A unit that saved hundreds of lives?" Caldwell froze. The smile on his face stiffened. Another reporter held up a printed financial document. "Can you explain payments from North Vietnam?" The hall erupted, camera flashes strobing, and Caldwell, once invincible, began to tremble. He stammered, desperately seeking justification, but his panicked eyes betrayed him. At last, he abandoned the podium, his steps urgent, as if fleeing from his own past. Isaac, watching live from Savannah, squeezed Brooks's hand. Tears silently fell. "We did it," he whispered, voice choked with emotion. But the battle was far from over. 1 week later, the Phoenix Battalion's members filed into a congressional hearing room, blinding lights overhead, cameras capturing every moment. Isaac, though breathing heavily, sat upright, his gaze unwavering. Samuel Hayes, hands shaking from Parkinson's, presented his medical records, voice low yet incisive, like a physician saving truth itself. Luis Navarro spoke of the explosions they set to clear paths for POW rescues. Pride gleamed in his eyes. Marcus stood behind them, emotion welling as he watched these unsung heroes finally step into the light. Jeremiah Brooks took the stand, his stride as steady as when he had led the Phoenix Battalion through jungle darkness. He opened his laptop and played the recording of Caldwell's cold, remorseless command. "Destroy all records. The Phoenix Battalion must never exist." The hearing room fell silent, then erupted into murmurs of outrage. Brooks looked directly at the senators, his tone calm yet powerful. "We did not fight for medals. We fought for the truth." Isaac, seated behind him, felt his chest grow light, as though 50 years of burden had been lifted. The public ignited. On social media, the hashtag Phoenix Team trended, accompanied by stories of forgotten valor. Veterans organizations issued statements demanding a full investigation. Civil rights groups called for formal recognition of the Phoenix Battalion. Caldwell's reputation crumbled like a sand castle before the tide. He was summoned by the Senate Ethics Committee. His sheen of power vanished, leaving a man to face the consequences of his lies. Back in Savannah, Isaac sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sun set in fiery hues. He thought of his fallen brothers, of years spent in silence. His body was frail, but his spirit had never been stronger. Brooks patted his shoulder. Their eyes met, and words were unnecessary. They had won, not just for themselves, but for the unsung heroes. 3 months after the storm in Washington, where the Phoenix Battalion was officially recognized, Isaac Coleman, now weakened by his lung disease, sat in a wheelchair. His trembling hands cradled the old steel box. As the president pinned the Medal of Honor to his chest, Isaac looked up, his eyes blurred with tears. Not for glory, but for the brothers who had sacrificed their lives, posthumously honored today, finally inscribed in history. In his heart, 50 years of pain dissolved, making way for peace. At Arlington National Cemetery, a granite monument was unveiled, engraved with the vibrant Phoenix emblem. Once hidden in shame on Isaac's wrist, it now blazed as a symbol of courage, illuminating the legacy of the Phoenix Battalion. Isaac touched his scar, feeling his brothers standing beside him, smiling. He knew, truth, though buried, will always rise. With the strength he had left, Isaac founded the Phoenix Fund, to document Black service members' histories and support veterans seeking justice. He vowed that no hero would ever be forgotten because of their skin color. Jeremiah Brooks, the indomitable commander, did not live to see the fund's work. He passed away from cancer soon after the ceremony, his face serene, like a soldier who had completed his final mission. "We did it, Isaac," he had whispered before he departed, his hand clasped around his comrade's. Marcus Rivera continued his career, bringing the Phoenix Battalion's story to younger generations. On one visit to see Isaac in Memphis, Marcus's son, a curious-eyed teen, pointed to the scar on Isaac's wrist. "What does it mean, sir?" Isaac smiled, his voice warm and low. "It reminds us that truth, though buried deep, will always find a way to rise, like a phoenix from the ashes." He met Marcus's gaze. In their eyes, they shared an understanding of a journey that had transformed them both. Isaac returned to Soulsville, his heart lighter than it had ever been. He knew his time was limited, but the Phoenix Battalion's legacy would endure. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see people tuning in from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can bring you many more great tales.